For me, I am Gen Z. I'm like the oldest year within the Gen Z group. But I have this experience with my work, over the past 8 years where it just seems like there's an increasing amount of expectation to be always on. And also with AI becoming, more interwoven into how work gets done or how work is expected to get done, there's this expectation around like this needs to be done quicker than maybe it was before. You've got Teams and email on your phone, so you might as well respond to me at 10 p.m. It just feels unique and like a slippery slope. And I don't know if that was a thing, when my grandpa worked, 50 years ago, like he didn't have a laptop and a cell phone. And I know he would bring a stack of papers home and that was his work. But it was like, I'm going to do it on my own time. I'm not getting a ding on my phone or a notification around the timeliness of how quickly this needs to be done. And I'm just curious if that's something that other generations have experienced or if it's more unique to Gen Z and like those who are still in the workforce versus, my silent generation grandpa.
It's hip replacement number 56. Kyle, you're somewhere fashionable today, aren't you?
I am. I'm in someplace fashionable, but someplace also low on internet. I'm in Menorca.
You're in Spain then, like normal.
I am in Spain. Yeah.
See, I don't want to make fun of Spain too much. I like Spain. Coming back to Spain just in a couple of months. Very excited about that.
Well, we'll see you there.
Costa Brava, here we come. Yeah, we're going to actually get to see each other in Barcelona this time, hopefully.
Mm-hmm.
Well, so Kyle, we're here with our guest, Kate Daykin, who is author of the Pulse Check newsletter and also a consumer researcher in general, and holds down a 9-to-5 at Ford as well, which means she's in Detroit, one of my favorite cities in America. Did you know that? It's one of my favorites. Have we ever talked about that?
No.
Kyle, it's not.
We haven't had an occasion to talk about. Yeah, I know, seriously, but we haven't had the occasion to talk about Detroit. I think Kate might be our first guest from Detroit, if I recall correctly.
I think that could be true.
I'm honored to be kicking off the Detroit train then.
The D train, as they call it. Yeah, Kate, I was saying this to you off mic, but I used to come to Detroit fairly frequently, and it really, what I think some naysayers might see in its, like post boom, downturn, I saw interesting possibility. It reminded me of the Berlin of New York the first time I went, where you had this sort of like amazing infrastructure which was not largely underutilized, but some of it was underutilized. There was a really interesting creative population of people, and it just felt like it was kind of this low gravity environment where if you wanted to do something interesting, you could. There were kids that we met that were renting a 9-story building for like $700 a month or something like that, and just having crazy art parties and stuff. Is Detroit, that was in probably 2010 or so. Is Detroit still got that vibe?
I mean, I'm obviously biased, but I do think it still has that vibe. Like, speaking of the crazy art parties, I just bought tickets to go on this barge during Detroit's Movement Festival weekend in a few weeks.
Oh, nice.
So I feel like we still have that energy going on. Yeah.
Wait, how awesome. long have you been in Detroit? Like, are you from there? Are you native, or have you been there long enough that you've sort of seen changes over the years? Because I mean, to Ben's point, like Detroit has had a lot of ups and downs, and in the past 20 years has been a real renaissance.
Totally. I was telling Ben off mic before this. I grew up here. I was born in London, but I grew up here. And I've definitely seen the evolution of the city. Like when I was younger, it was a thing around here. Like, you don't go hang out in Detroit because the rep was that it wasn't safe. And I have not once thought of it being unsafe, like in the past 10 years, at least. Regularly down there, like spending a lot of time going out to bars and restaurants, and like I walk around without thinking twice. So it's really cool to see
Amazing.
the evolution. Yeah. And the neighborhoods just keep growing, and it's such a special city. It's so diverse. Yeah. I love it.
The other thing about Detroit that I thought was really interesting was that I went, maybe not for the first time, but I went shortly after I had gone to Mumbai, as it is more properly known, and India and Bombay in particular is so incredibly visual, like so colorful. And I got to Detroit and had the sort of the same feeling, because there's so much graffiti that doesn't get buffed, and so like the whole city is kind of this amazing canvas of color, riot of color, which I thought was amazing. I mean, for an American city, I thought was kind of amazing, and just struck this strange parallel to this foreign capital.
Yeah, I love that. And I think you hit the nail on the head too earlier with Berlin. Like I think there's so many parallels between Detroit and especially European cities, and it's a melting pot. Like there's so much diversity, there's a lot of art, there's a lot going on there. I highly recommend another
that.
visit, since it's probably evolved a little bit.
Well, so I mean, thank you. I will take you up on that. The thing that strikes me, because this is a conversation between generations X, Y, and Z, thematically, is it struck me at the time that Detroit would be a great place for young people to go and to occupy, in the most pleasant sense of that word, as a way to build a foundation and to get a hold of this kind of upwardly mobile American dream that maybe a New York or a Los Angeles has kind of, priced them out of at this point. Is that, do you see that happening around you as well?
Yeah, it's so interesting you bring that up. I was in New York last week and talking to people about the comparison around just like living in a big city like New York versus living in Detroit. And yeah, I mean it's much more affordable here. I bought a house at 26, which I cannot fathom. Thank you. I cannot fathom the idea of purchasing property in New York or LA or like any of those other big cities.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, obviously inflation is a thing, but the cost of living here it makes things a little bit more accessible.
No, it's awesome. And I mean, Kyle and I are both friendly with Sam Valenti of the mighty Ghostly Records, which came out of Ann Arbor originally, but was really based around, Detroit based music. And just to hear him talk about the creative community there as this incredible locus it has always made me feel like that's not just a viable path, but one that would be really interesting and creative. In other words, it's not just a financial decision. It's one that is cultural and informed by the arts and so on and so forth. So anyway, wow, I didn't expect this to be so much about Detroit, Kate, to be totally honest, but there we go.
I love it. I mean, all my Detroit pals are gonna love the represent. Yeah.
I have not been to Detroit, and I have been very Detroit curious. And this, to exactly what you were saying about Ben, you have to come back. I need to go for the first time. So thank you for being. Well, let's say the thing about Detroit. I feel like Detroit, like Chicago, anybody who lives there and or is from there are like, they're such good ambassadors for the city in ways that I feel like is very different from other cities. And it's always so charming and inspiring. And like, I need to go to Chicago. I haven't been there either. So one day.
Yeah.
We're going to organize the Hip Replacement World Tour, Kate. You can host us.
Seriously.
Yeah, I was going to say this is clearly a Detroit podcast now, so you got to get down here and become the ambassadors.
I love that. Well, so Kyle, we know Kate from Pulse Check, but talk a little bit about what about Pulse Check resonates with you, because you booked Kate, and I'm always keen to see what you're paying attention to.
I mean, I feel like, Kate, I've seen your work around like the halls of Substack, from just running Pulse Check and from, the various things that you do. But I think like, to me, the real this person, this work, like, it's always so good, was earlier this year, the Shopify story that you did, or Shop My, excuse me, not Shopify, Shop My story you did. I think that sort of really hit at a time when like cultural consciousness was starting to pick up about it. And it did a really good job, I thought, and like in such a succinct way, which I have a really bad job of being succinct, but like in such a succinct way of why it was sort of appealing and how it was. I think you called it, the why the hell not economy, or what the hell sure economy, of people who are like executives, for example, getting on Shop My, and not because they're trying to be influencers, no, but it's just like, yeah, why not? And that's sort of everybody now. And I thought that was a really good, such a good way of putting it. And I think like all of your work, um, whether it is your own independent research or your sort of like cultural analysis via research from like, let's say, Google or other outlets too, like that, I think you do such a good job, and I am so glad we get to have you on. So thank you for joining us.
Kate, where does all that come from for you? Did Pulse Check start as a side hustle? Did it start as a, I don't know what, like a college project? Did you decide that you could pay your mortgage in Detroit with a Substack newsletter and go for it that way? Like how did it start?
Yeah. I joke that I've always had lemonade stand energy, and I'm always working on something. I always have a side project, a side gig. Like when I was in college, I started a swimwear line out of my college apartment, and I ended up making like 180 swimsuits. Yeah. So the lemonade stand energy, I joke, is always pulsing through my veins. And Pulse Check started in February of 24. And it was kind of this idea behind like writing about customer experience. Like I'm super passionate about understanding why somebody's going to pull out their wallet to, put their hard-earned cash towards your brand versus someone else's. And so it evolved. What originally was more of case studies around brands that I thought were doing a really good job with that, into a deep dive of like, what are people choosing to make decisions around with their wallets these days, and like what are they putting their energy towards. And I think decision making is at the root of it. Definitely more focused these days on things that maybe people don't openly talk about, like the shop myification is a great example. I also did research oh sorry, go ahead.
What is it? Explain shop myification, please.
Yeah.
Ben, do you not know what Shop My is, really quickly?
No, I know what Shop My is, but I want to understand I want to understand Kate's
Just making sure. Just making sure.
Ben, I went to get you set up.
Shop My. Yeah, I've got a little engraved coffee cup that Laura Riley made with Shop My. I know all about it. It's a party in New York. I've been there before. I know what's going on. Sorry, Kate, go ahead.
No, you're good. Do you have a Shop My? Because if not, we're going to get you set up with one.
No, I do not. I haven't done any kind of affiliate business at all.
Okay.
Partially because I'm bad at business, partially because no one has ever helpfully offered to set me up with a Shop My.
Okay, so we have Detroit Visit and Shop My on the to-do list.
There's going to be a whole to-do list for Ben at the end of this episode. I can just tell.
Yeah. But the shop myification that I wrote about was really focused on how I see these like executives and people who are in these leadership roles at companies. They started making Shop My links and like casually posting it on their Instagram story, or dropping it in a TikTok comment when someone said, "Where'd you get your dress from?" or something like that. And I started digging in and thinking, okay, this is really fascinating. You have this likely high paying corporate job with a lot of benefits, and you're choosing to make additional money on the side through affiliate links. And so it was just an interesting deep dive into understanding like, why are people doing that? And I think, Kyle, to your point, is this why the hell not? Like, why not just put a link out there and make a few bucks? And I don't know if it's just about making a few bucks, or, building this personal brand on another level that we talked about a little bit offline, but it's fascinating. I'm curious to see how it's going to evolve.
I think it's mailbox money, right? Like everybody wants mailbox money, and everybody wants that little annuity that you don't have to work for. And so if you have a personal platform, you have some level of influence. And certainly like marketers and executives are very good in that regard, because everybody knows they have some ability to distribute power or money or both. So they have a naturally receptive audience. Yeah, I mean, why would you not? Of course, but by the same token, it's also like, I think I got to get in while the getting's good. I think marketers are often incredibly conscious of the fact that their positions are under a lot of scrutiny and not necessarily longstanding and temporary. And so they also are given to their lesser angels sometimes too, in terms of capitalizing on things that are short-term wins, but not long-term positive. Not to say that I would turn a shot my down in any case. Kate, I won't.
You never know. You might want the mail money. It's nice.
I listen. I mean, that's is why we have the Substack, right? Although I'm about to undergo a pivot in my strategy, so I've got to figure out what to do with my paid subscribers.
Oh wow.
Well, so speaking of those kinds of why people pull out their wallets, so one of the stories that we thought to talk about is this Wall Street Journal story about young people making different kinds of social decisions, particularly getting to the point where cost of living has, or maybe cost of being entertained has reached such levels that now it's like a fact of life to pregame at home. This does raise a bunch of questions. When have young people not pregamed at home? When have young people not wanted to save money in that way? And what are the other cultural factors? I remember, like, my wife lived in LA for a year before we got married, and pre-gaming was a huge thing out there because the bars just weren't open all that late. And so if you wanted to get to an equilibrium in terms of the way you were feeling, you had to start early, essentially. So I don't know. And what do you, I mean, is it just an inflation thing? Is it Causey libs, or is it something else?
I think perhaps the quantity of drinks people are consuming before they go to the bar, before they go to an event, has shifted a little bit with inflation. But like,
yeah,
pre-gaming's always been a thing. Pre-gaming's fun.
Right.
I also think like, who doesn't want a pre-game where you get to control the music and control the vibe? Like, I think that's always been a thing, and maybe it's slightly relabeled or, getting a new brand, but pre-gaming's always been a thing from my experience.
That was my sort of thought on it. Was like, I don't think this has gone away, number one. I don't think this is either Gen Z discovering this or millennials going back to it or whatever you want to call it. Like, I think that just like is a part of any sort of like, you're doing a night out well, be it that if you're going to dinner or whatever, or however you shape it, like that is a part of it. And maybe it's something a little bit more central because of economic circumstances. The thing in the story that I thought was most interesting, quote unquote, to me was the idea of flasks being used much more. And like, I can't say that I have seen many flasks out in the wild. I definitely know that like that is something that is, always sort of cracked down upon for whatever reason. We know why, but like I wonder if maybe because you would rather have a butt in the seat versus someone not buy a ticket because they can't buy drinks, if there will be more allowances for something like a flask. Because like I know from going to many a show that like they check your bag, and if they see like even a bottle of water, they're going to dump it out. So like if it's going to mean, maybe you're not going to spend $40 at the bar getting 2 or 3 drinks, but you will spend $150 on the ticket to the show. Are you as a venue or a musician or whoever more willing to take that bet? Because like, yeah, let people in with a flask. Who gives a shit? That's my take. But I know there's probably more larger legal safety concerns or whatever, but like, let people live.
It is, well, okay, letting people live aside, it is interesting to think that the idea of a pre-measured or pre-packaged or just, like increment of let's call it alcohol, liquid courage, fun, whatever, in a bottle or in a flask, it is a incipient topic though. Like there was a story in the FT over the weekend about how the new head of Diageo is leaning very hard into ready to drink stuff. There was a in that story there was a statistic about how Buzzballs had grown by 15% in a month at some point last year or early this year, which is stunning. I don't know, Kate, how many Buzzballs you got floating around Europe house at the moment, but I find them distressing. Oh, you got no zero buzz balls at Kate's house.
I've never had a buzz ball, if you want to know the truth.
Well, nor have I. But then again, I'm just constitutionally too old to have one. They literally won't sell me them because they're just like, sorry, bro, no, too much for you. But it does sort of make you wonder, like, is there a predilection towards, or new predilection towards, self-contained doses of alcohol that didn't used to exist. And I say this because, like, Jeff, friend of the show, former guest Jeff Carvalho, wrote recently about a flask and taking a flask to shows, which for a 50-year-old guy, seems like novel. It seems like a novel thing to discover at 50, essentially. By the same token, Stanley, maker of of course, Stanley, famous Stanley Cups, has a huge business in flask as well, which I happen to be investigating for a different project at the moment. And then buzzballs and RTDs, and you wonder, sort of like, is that just because people want to have a measured experience with their alcohol, essentially? We got some pondering faces on the pod here, folks, for those who aren't watching.
It's a good question. It makes me it makes me think of, this is probably wrong, but it makes me think sort of like, in the age of wellness, being able to get a drink that is sort of really contained, of like, this is how much you're actually having, appeals to people. That is where my mind goes. But it's also funny because, like, I know, like, on TikTok, like, Cutwaters have a moment of people being like, let me see how much I can drink. Like, this is like poison. Let me try it. So, like, it's different, but, like, I do think it's related in a way, because I do think the dosage thing is really, I think, the key term. But, like, I'm curious, Kate, if you've done any research in this space, or even have any inklings, given your thinking about, how consumers think, because I think that that's like a really fascinating question. I think does, for some people, speak to a lot of intersections of how one shops.
Yeah, it's an interesting thought. And I was actually talking to someone last weekend in New York. She owns a restaurant in New York, and we were just sitting at the bar and we were talking about alcohol in general and alcohol consumption. And it's on my to-do list that I'm looking at right now, of like research that I want to explore. So I'll report back once I get some real findings on it. But I think with flasks, it goes back to the pre-gaming thing. Like, I think flasks are fun. And I also think when you sneak alcohol in somewhere, like, I don't know, rules are meant to be broken. It's kind of fun to sneak alcohol in somewhere.
The art of getting over. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. And I also think, inflation plays a key in that as well. But I also think it's kind of fun to just be in control of your alcohol adventure that evening, especially if you're pre-gaming, right? Like, you choose what you're drinking at home, and maybe you get to the bar and you're like, I really want this specific French vodka that I love so much. Like, does that play a role in it as well? But I don't know. I'm very pro pack a little shooter in your purse and, like, make it your own adventure.
I thought you said Detroit was safe. Just JK, guys. Only JK. Just only JK. Well, it is. Yeah, it is interesting. And of course, the other question, as always in these discussions, is what is the indicator and what is the counter indicator? Like, having visited series producer Campbell at college last weekend, and having attended what is called a darty, which is a party that happens during the day outside. That's why it's called a darty, as opposed to whatever else you want to call it, a narty or just a party. These are all real terms. I'm struggle with them, but okay. But one of the defining characteristics of the darty was the presence of the Borgs. The Borg.
I'm not familiar with the Borg.
The Borg is an acronym for blackout rage gallon, and it is you go to the store and you buy a gallon of water, and you pour out some significant portion of it, and you pour in your spirit of choice, and then you pour in like a Mio or some sort of like, could be electrolytes, could be some sort of flavored water mix. And then you have your all day libation. And so who needs a little flask when you can just have your gallon jug with which to get blackout raging? Suffice it to say, that was not my favorite part of the Darty. The whole thing as an indicator was pretty scary to me, to be honest. But when you're young and your constitution allows it, I guess. But it is a real counterindicator to this, culture of moderation, dosage, so on and so forth. I don't know. Any thoughts about Borgs, guys?
Do I live under a rock? Is a Borg a thing? Like Darty, very well versed in a Darty. Borg?
It's a thing.
Borgs are definitely a thing. They've definitely been going for some time, and like people will decorate them. They're very colorful. They're like, it makes this otherwise obscene thing really cute in a way. I do not. Granted, if I were the age I was in college now, or if I was in college now, like, I would be like going crazy with the Borg. But like, no, like it is kind of a bit of a hellscape. This is kind of a tangent, but very related, is I do think there is a sort of conversation to be had about young people and drinking. Not that I think they're doing anything crazier than any of us did who are older when we were younger, but there's a woman on TikTok right now who's getting some attention for doing the I forget exactly the turn of phrase that she's using, but it's like the 50-day like alcohol like binge challenge where she literally drinks
Bender.
a lot of. Yeah, that's what it is. Yes, it's like the 50-day Bender challenge, and it's like, oh my god, it's horrifying. So it's a different thing, but it's like, I think there's going to be a conversation about young people drinking in the way that there always is for every generation.
Okay, so what's the 50-day Bender challenge? You just get
she
drunk
just drinks
every day
a lot.
for 50 days?
Yeah. Yes.
But
that's it.
I mean, okay, so in the age of the quantified self, I would think though there's got to be some sort of metric that you have to hit. Like you've got to blow a BAC of 0.08 or something like that. You've got to be legally intoxicated every day for 50 days or you don't complete the Bender. Can we get any metrics in here? Kate is our consumer researcher. Can we establish any quantitative metrics here?
I would establish a Bender as alcohol every single day. I don't know if there's a quantity you have to hit. I think how I view it is like you're drinking every single day in some capacity to make it a Bender.
Whoa.
Yeah,
but we can deep dive.
I'm on a Bender all the time in that case, other than February and October. Okay. Well, so that then brings up another question, right, around health, which is I was listening to some podcast or another, and they were talking about it was Prof G Markets. They were talking about a test that I want to say is called Nuvo that's available in the UK. It's a $300 full holistic diagnostic test, like health diagnostic of the sort that you used to go to the Mayo Clinic to get, whatever. So full, blood centrifuge, body scans, all of this sort of stuff. And it's 300 pounds, which seems very accessible for this kind of holistic thing. And the conclusion was that Professor G should stop drinking as much. That seems to be the advice that everyone would get. So, yeah, at what point is there is there a flippening that will happen here at any point, Kate? Do you see any indications, or again, is all of this like doomerism because we've always sought to escape from the mundanity of our lives?
I mean,
Kyle looked like he had something to say, and then I'll share my thoughts.
Well, I was just going to say that, like, I think that, alcohol is a truism for just humanity. I do think the access point is maybe a bit more easy, which then heightens all these sort of conversations that we're having. But I think it's interesting, given, to the point of Flash, to the point of pre-gaming, to all of these things, like Buzzballs even, like it all gets at I would argue, a reflection of economics. Like, on one hand, it's like, yes, rationing whatever because of wellness, yada yada, but also like it is stressful times for a lot of people. And for a lot of people, having a drink is a great escape, and it's really easy to access. It is what it is. There are kind of, I don't believe them that like, a glass of wine is kind of healthy. I'm like, no, sadly, I don't think that's true. I want to believe that's true. But like there is, I think that is
Two
something that's
glasses.
like within,
It doesn't get healthy until you have two glasses.
okay, well, sure, yeah, that's true. That is true. But like, it's something within arm's reach that I think in these times of like of a lot of stresses, it's unsurprising that I think people are sort of like thinking about alcohol in really interesting ways.
I like to think that a glass of wine is kind of like a dose of fruit, so I'm with Ben on that. But
I love that.
I
It's
will
like a Capri
say,
Sun, only
yeah,
nicer, more
yeah, like a
sophisticated.
fancy Capri Sun. I think I'm very pro everything in moderation. I will say what's really fascinating is
Same.
all the fitness trackers with like I think Emily Sundberg coined the term, or maybe somebody else said, like they're cops on a finger. And I intentionally, I'm holding up, for those not watching, I'm holding up my Aura ring that I intentionally take off when I'm going to go out and like have more than a few drinks, because it yells at me. Yeah. And it basically shames me. And I think there's a happy medium to be found in this society that is so like Pilates, matcha, let's wake up early and go for a walk. And everyone is so anxious, especially in younger generations, and they're not necessarily going out as much. I'm not saying go out and consume ridiculous amounts of alcohol and copy this woman on TikTok on her bender. There's a happy medium to be found, but I think that's with everything in life. And yeah, I'm curious to see how it's going to continue to evolve.
Well, that actually brings up an interesting point, right? So if the woman on TikTok who is on a historic bender and me and my daily cocktail are doing the same things, so just calling them differently, it does beg the question to, or it does beg an investigation to like why she's doing what she's doing, and it gets to this other story that you wanted to talk about, Kate, which was around the idea of personal branding and whether personal brands are a requisite part of what we all do now, right? Am I blowing it because I'm not branding my bender, or is that a part of my own personal brand management that I choose not to call it that, but like lightweight out there and wherever she is trying to claim stolen valor from me. I'm angry at her now. But you know what I mean? It's like, to what extent are we just we're calling the same thing by two different names and therefore changing the significance of it?
I think this point that we're at in culture has such a low barrier to entry if you want to brand literally any aspect of your life and make it go viral, or do your best at making it go viral. And it kind of goes back to my comment on the shop myification around like the why the hell not economy, where I think people are like, life is expensive. You see other people online, be able to quit their corporate jobs because they post some videos of themselves dancing. Obviously, there's a lot more that goes into it than just that. But, I think you have this opportunity to go play around and like, pardon my French, I won't say it, but like F around and find out, like maybe this can turn into something.
Yeah. Well, this is interesting, Kyle. And I wonder, we've reached a point also with algorithmic selection and amplification where the stakes are so low for making a misstep that you can just do it, and the likelihood that anybody of consequence is going to see it is so low because we get so many other things fed to us first that it's like living in zero gravity. And conversely, if it does go viral, then that creates a bunch of opportunity for you. So it's, whereas I would never have wanted to brand myself a binge drinker early in my career because people would have thought Ben's got a problem. Now it's like, well, fuck it, I might as well just call myself a binge drinker, because nobody who matters is ever going to see it unless they see it, and then I get a Diageo sponsorship. Sir Dave, get at me.
I really quickly on that, like I remember, I'd be interested, Kate, if you had a similar experience. Ben, I don't think you had this, because I think this was definitely something that did not exist. But like when I was in college in the mid aughts, when Facebook and tag photos are just becoming a thing, like hand in hand with my dad saying, if you get a tattoo, you'll never get a job, was also like, you need to take those photos of you at a party off of your Facebook page. You're never going to get a job. That we know is not true. And I'm curious if that sort of thinking even exists anymore, because like it is so open. And I do think that you can do anything. You can fail your way up or down.
It was true there was probably a summer during which that was true. And then it ceased to be it ceased to be true. Whether it ceased to be said or whether it ceased to be perceived is a different question. So I guess, Kate, to that instance, you're much more recently out of school than we are. Did you get media trained in that way, or however you want to call it?
Yeah, I did not, but all of my friends who were in Greek life did. And I know that there were strict rules if you were in Greek life of like, you cannot be caught. Yeah, you cannot be caught having a photo of yourself holding alcohol or drinking alcohol in a Facebook album. But I definitely did not stick to those standards. Like that just wasn't, I guess for us normies who weren't in Greek life, that wasn't really a thing.
Well, it's funny you should say that, because and maybe as evidence of the fact that the idea has flipped. Did you guys see this video from Indiana fraternity rush at Indiana a couple of months ago maybe? There was some cops, I believe it was at Indiana in Bloomington. There were cops that went into the basement of a fraternity and during a pledge event, and there were like 40 young men shirtless standing facing walls, and the cop had a long on body cam conversation with one of the brothers from the fraternity, who was essentially just like, oh yeah, no, this is just normal, everybody's having a good time. And all the shirtless pledges who are still facing wall are just like, yeah, we're having a great time, we love this, we're having a great time. And the guy just kept talking, the kid just kept talking, and it was like, all right, it might get out. If you go on for too long, it might get out.
Well, it's so interesting. We're worried about like what you post online, but I guess you need to be careful what you say with the body cam footage too. That's going viral just as much as your TikTok is.
I mean, listen, we're talk about the quantified self. Just presume that everything is on camera, and then adjudicate to what extent it will ever be discovered by, the friendly or adversarial AI agent. Have you heard about AI, Kate? It's supposed to be good.
No, I haven't used it yet. What's that about?
Kyle, it's funny because Kyle is on record as being, anti-AI.
The most anti-AI.
You think you're the most?
No, definitely not the most, but I definitely am a contender, I think.
Okay. It's funny because series producer Campbell, when we were talking, he recently, I'm very proud of him, announced that he's going to do a double major in digital content management, and so very much in the zone of the show and so on and so forth. His involvement here is great. But one of the things that I was saying to him, I was just like, well, a lot of that, there's a philosophy to that, and then there's a practice to that. And a lot of the practice, you should be looking at AI tools to figure out how to best optimize, literally the digital organization of things. And his response was, no, man, fade AI. And which I, am emotionally, like, really resonates with me, but tactically, strategically does not. I wonder, Kate, does your cohort, like if you're out to drinks with your friends and you've got your flasks and your shooters and your purse and so on and so forth, and you guys are just shooting the shit, what's the general feeling around AI? Is it positive, negative, jury's out, what?
Yeah, there's a spectrum for sure. I mean, I've got friends that are probably similarly on the podium with Kyle around like very anti AI. And I also have a friend who literally taught me how to build an agent last week that I had no idea how to do. And I was like, wow, I had no idea the tech could even do this. So I have people all over the spectrum, and I think that's pretty consistent across generations for the most part. You've got people who are heavy users, heavy optimizers, and then you've got people who are like, I'm not touching that thing, and it grosses me out to see people touch it. And then you have everyone in the middle who is like, ugh, I don't know how to interact with this in a way that feels comfy for me and also feels ethically and morally, safe for me as well. So I think everyone's all over the map.
Kyle, as you'd imagine it, do you foresee a tipping point? Do you foresee an end of the continuum that you're on at some point where you just go, all right,
Well, wait, do you think for me to
example
become
of why I'm right? No. Well, not. Look, we all exist on a continuum. We all exist on a spectrum, right? And though you are anti-AI, you are not, by your own admission, the most anti-AI. Is there anything that you see that would make you the most anti-AI? Or alternately, is there anything, as in Kate's example, where you're sort of like, oh, hang on.
Yeah, I don't think there's anything that can make me more anti-AI. Like, I feel like everything bad that you can think of, it's doing. Like, fascism, it's ruining the planet, it's making people like dumb and go crazy. Like, you name it, it's robbing from artists. It's like, you name it, it's already doing it. It's like, it's doing every bad thing, unless it literally takes a knife and kills you. Like, it's doing all the bad things already. But I think the thing that would maybe, like, to me, like the biggest thing to make it maybe more palatable, and I know this is a good swath of people, and this is like check one of maybe me being like, let me reconsider, is like the environmental sort of cost. And that is like literally to the amount of water being used all the way to how it is like becoming an environmental nuisance to small towns, et cetera. So like to me, it's like that is a big thing that I think is like the number one top thing I would need to like cross off the list that they would have to do, which is possible that it could get more environmentally friendly. But then like the next thing is like stop stealing from artists. And I don't think they're ever going to stop doing that. That's sort of a part of the system. So I think to me, it's more of like a worldview that's being expressed by a brand, power brokers, whatever. And I don't agree with that. And the tools I'm kind of ambivalent on, but I think like sort of the things surrounding it, I don't love.
Kyle, how does that impact what brands you support? Like, if you know brands are using AI, whether it's with marketing or how they create their products, like, how does that impact your willingness to spend money with that brand?
That is a great question. Like, it depends, but like, most, for example, like the Starbucks using ChatGPT. Well, I'm not going to Starbucks anyway. That doesn't affect me. It does makes me think of them even lower because it's such a like, this is ridiculous. But I don't think there's any, as far as a brand, it doesn't make me, it would really depend on how they're sort of like framing it or something. I think a brand that suffers more from not talking about it are like politicians. I think like that is a big thing now. Like it's a big conversation this year is like that quote unquote brand and literally like shopping brands who are going against AI, like that says something. Like that says something, and politicians like them needing to talk about, like those are two things that I think do actually mean something, because I do think that like it doesn't compel me to shop them when they're like I'm anti-AI, but I do think that means something to a lot of people. It means something in a bigger way when a brand is like we are introducing AI. When a brand says they're not using AI, that is more resonating or resonant to people who have a similar sort of feeling, which is really interesting.
Kate, I don't know, the implicative trends there in any of the, research and reporting that you're doing?
I think the biggest thing I see is people I feel like people are judgmental. I think that's the right word
Yeah.
of whether it's a human or a brand's use of AI. Uh, and it just depends where they fall on that spectrum. And if that brand or person whose content they are digesting is in this kind of frame that feels comfortable for them to digest, then I think people are fine with it. But I do think there's like this ick that people get if you're too far outside of that acceptable zone with AI usage. But I think what we have to think about as a society moving forward is how do we label AI usage moving forward when it becomes even more invisible? And how do you know if what you're consuming was created by AI or not?
Well, I have, I mean, I think my view of it is along those same lines, but inverse, which is the presumption is that it is already in everything, will be even more so in everything. My feeling is always that it will at that point recede into the background and just be sort of a part of the firmament. It's like electricity. But I do agree that having some level of definition or defining the constitutionality of it is as an ingredient is important. Kyle, you were going to jump in.
I was going to say that, like, I do think what's interesting about this conversation in general is, like, I do think it represents something. And I think, Kate, you mentioned this, is that, like, your friends sort of cover the whole spectrum of possibility. And I think that that is definitely true in the macro of it all, of the conversation. And I think literally the conversation that we're having, I think, is something that probably people in cities, people who work in something vaguely, not necessarily brandy, but like maybe tech, maybe just like in corporate, quote unquote, like they're touched by it. But like, I don't think my parents are thinking about it. I don't really think my brothers are thinking about it. Like, and I think that it's easy to lose track of that. Like when you are online in the media ecosystem, it is all anybody's talking about. But I think like in the real world, a lot of people don't in ways. I do think there will become a tipping point and we're getting there, but like I don't think normal people are, unless you have a data center down the street, like I don't think you're thinking about the implications as deeply in any way, because it doesn't really matter. It's just like Wikipedia or whatever.
It's like Wikipedia? What does that even mean? I don't understand.
How do you mean? Sorry, I might have cut out.
Oh, anyway. Well, look, I guess here's my the transition I want to make actually is one other story, Kate, that you highlighted, which was around how much people are working, right? Like the proliferation of all of these technologies and proliferation of AI means that we can be working all the time, right? Our agents can be, frittering away on our behalf, making our travel plans or optimizing our shop my links or whatever it is. And and so consequently, we can theoretically become super productive. One of the stories that you talked about was like the proliferation of people constantly working and the expectation that people constantly be working. I feel a real resistance to that in what I would call the touch drastification of people younger than me, for instance. What strikes you about that whole thing? Like, where are we in that transition right now?
Yeah, and I'm curious to get both of your thoughts on it as well, because for me, I am Gen Z. I'm like the oldest year within the Gen Z group. But I have this experience with my work, over the past 8 years where it just seems like there's an increasing amount of expectation to be always on. And also with AI becoming, more interwoven into how work gets done or how work is expected to get done, there's this expectation around like this needs to be done quicker than maybe it was before. You've got Teams and email on your phone, so you might as well respond to me at 10 p.m. It just feels unique and like a slippery slope. And I don't know if that was a thing, when my grandpa worked, 50 years ago, like he didn't have a laptop and a cell phone. And I know he would bring a stack of papers home. and that was his work, but it was like, I'm going to do it on my own time. I'm not getting a ding on my phone or a notification around the timeliness of how quickly this needs to be done. And I'm just curious if that's something that other generations have experienced, or if it's more unique to Gen Z and like those who are still in the workforce versus, you know, my silent generation grandpa.
Kyle, what do you think?
It's complicated for me because like when I started out, I was working in entertainment in Hollywood, and like that is notoriously a I need this yesterday sort of landscape. And like that was a space where it was always like you're always on. And like I get that. Like that is the nature of that industry. There are other industries that are like that and still are like that, et cetera, et cetera. I do think like, you know, over the years of having worked in other industries as well, like for example, marketing, and like social media marketing, which like by its nature is online and is always on. But there, I remember starting in and around those spaces in the mid 2010s, especially in the early 2020s, and like the feeling being like, you know, we're not doing brain surgery. Like that would come up a lot. And like even working with big companies, like we're not doing brain surgery. Like you can log off, you should log off. Did that actually happen? I don't know. But like it is something that I do think it says more about the company and more about a manager or whatever if you are able to do that, if that makes sense. And I definitely even know, like I have a friend now who's like, she works in social media and she bought a landline because every day at 6 o'clock she puts her phone away and she's like, if you need to contact me, I have a landline. So it's like
Wow.
I
like
think
that.
it's about, yeah, it's great, but like I think it's about maybe at this point defining it, because I think the lack of definition means it's
Sure.
everywhere. The work that is.
Well, and this is going to get to something that we talk about in a special edition of hip replacement upcoming in a couple of weeks. But I also think has a lot to do with life stage. I think, you know, you are in your prime striver years, Kate, and take that as, you know, a compliment. You have more energy than you will have later. You have more room to grow than maybe you will have later. You have more you know, experience and pedigree on which to build. You have a greater foundation than you did a few years ago, and so consequently it makes sense for you to sort of lean into that stuff. I think when you get a little higher up the totem pole, or you get a little older, or you get a little whatever, you can judge better what's necessary to react to and what's not. And I think the art of the modern workplace is figuring out how to navigate that well, so that you don't feel like my schedule is impenetrable and I will never respond, and I don't feel like you are at my beck and call all the time, or that everybody is at my beck and call all the time, because neither of those dynamics is good, right? There has to be a sense of mutual understanding and respect, and clearly, like, and this is my big concern about AI generally. It's like if we are just building systems that are a machine for more, the expectation is that we're gonna more our way out of this, out of our, you know, whatever dilemma, and that's probably not a good recipe.
But the other thing that's a part of this too is like, and I think you kind of are getting at this too, Ben. And AI is I don't know how it will complicate this. I know it will. Is like a lot of this also has to do with like where you are in the hierarchy. Is like again, like I worked as an assistant in Hollywood, where like you were always on. Like that was the expectation of the job. Is like you are the stereotypical, like they're gonna call you at midnight, whatever shit. Like yes, but like I do think the idea of like of this being more of a thing for young people is true, because like when you are, say, starting out or lower, quote unquote, on the corporate ladder, you do want oftentimes you do feel like you need to do more, or like it's you have to go that extra mile to be rewarded in the job. You can't really afford to log off in ways. Whether or not that's true is beside the point, but I do think if you do have quote unquote more power or seniority or age, sometimes you can afford that. Especially like, for a good example is like, I have a kid, I can't do this.
Yeah.
Like great, but like if you don't have a kid, that's where it gets really sticky. So like I think there are certain aspects or parts of the life stages, as you mentioned, Ben, that afford you that. And maybe we should lie about having kids. I don't know, but like that, it all goes hand in hand.
You have to start putting up a very elaborate facade if you lie about having kids. Then you have to start planning 1-year-old birthday parties for, don't do that.
Hey, a good acting exercise. It sounds great.
So Kate, we're on our way to wrapping up this episode, but I do want to ask you one final question, and that is, in response to everything that Kyle just said, and my thoughts too, do you see in your peer group anybody going, yeah, you know what, I specifically don't want to be on all the time, so I'm going to go, I have gone to be an HVAC tech, or I'm going to be a farmer, or whatever, the case may be. Do we actually see that? Because I think theoretically, particularly those of us that are in it, sort of imagine that and go, oh my God, it would be so glorious to just get up with the sun and go to bed with the moon and never get a phone call or whatever, or never get a Slack ding, more to the point. But does anybody actually do that? Anybody young actually do that?
Yeah, I do think it's becoming a thing. And I definitely am at this unique age where when I was in college, everyone was like, you need to study computer science. Like, that's the future. And now I think there's people in school that are like, ooh, I don't know. I think AI is probably just going to code everything. So that's probably not the most sustainable route to go down.
Right.
And I did this interesting research last year with Achuko, who writes as Sinon, and we talked to
former guest of the show.
Yes, former guest of the show. And her and I talked to like a ton, like 200 plus Gen Zers about how they felt about work. And I think you're starting to see this divide of people who don't want to follow those traditional career paths. And I think it goes back to the why the hell not economy, and like, why not just dabble in something else? Because is this thing that I thought was going to be this fruitful career path, maybe it's not what I thought it was going to be growing up. So I think you're going to continue to see people do that. And I think people who decide to do that sooner rather than later are probably on a smart camp to be making that decision, just given the way that the world is headed.
Yeah. Interesting. Plan in an uncertain world, plan for the least uncertain path.
Yeah.
Sage advice.
Yeah. What's a computer not going to take from you? They probably can't plumb yet or, install your AC. So worth exploring.
Yeah, for sure. All right. Well, Kate, it's been such a pleasure having you here on Hip Replacement episode number 56. Where do the kids find you?
Yeah, the kids can find me on Substack. That's probably my main spot. I'm also on Instagram, and when I'm feeling a little silly, I'll post on TikTok too.
Okay. All right. And that's the Pulse Check is the handle?
Pulse Check is for Substack. The others, my TikTok is Toasty Cheez-It Princess. I told you I was silly.
That is silly.
Yeah. And
incredible.
Then I post on,
but also really like sets you right up for that Shop My affiliate link to be put in there.
I'm really waiting for my email from Cheez-It. It just feels
Mondelez, get at me. Or is Cheez-It Mondelez? I know
no.
Wheat Thins and Triscuits are Mondelez.
Kellogg?
Anyway, we'll find out.
Yeah.
Okay. See, good old fashioned Michigan company. They're turning us back to the Detroit area.
Yes. It's a local thing here.
Awesome. And Kyle, what is the view from Menorca to close us out here?
Well, right now the sun is like almost setting, but it keeps saying it's threatening to rain, but it becomes very sunny, so that's nice. I do want the wind to stop because otherwise it's like you can't really enjoy the sun. So hopefully it will continue to blossom and grow and become more summery versus very springy. But it's a great island. Highly recommend.
Nice. All right, everybody. Well, listen, this has been Hip Replacement number episode 56. Clearly not getting any better at doing this as we go along. But Kate Daykin has been our guest, and of course you can find her at Pulse Check on Substack. You can find me at Sick on Substack, and you can find Kyle at The Trend Report on Substack. So come back and see us next week. And Kate, in the meantime, we look forward to your future research on single serve alcohol at, increasingly expensive events.
Thank you so much for having me, and I look forward to seeing you both in Detroit whenever you venture over here.
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. All right, y'all. We'll see you soon. Bye.